Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you join us today. My name is Allison Hahn. I'm the Executive Director of Grow North. And today we have an awesome panel in partnership with ImpactSkew talking about innovative solutions across the impact sector. And we have 4 great companies joining us today, but more importantly, we have a legend herself, Sue Marshall, the founder and CEO of Net Zero, joining us as the moderator. Net Zero is a specified benefit corporation that is a food upcycling company, and it tackles food waste by powering the safe capture and conversion of industrial food and beverage byproducts. And they do this into new sustainable upcycled food ingredients, and they manage to do it at scale, which is awesome. And so I am going to shut up and pass the mic over to Sue to get going on this conversation. She's going to introduce our 4 companies and then kick it off. Take it away, Sue.
Thank you, Allison. That's a wonderful intro. I appreciate that. Very excited. Upcycling is a thing now, so I'm glad to be here and be facilitating this great discussion on social impact. It's a big part of my heart. When I started Net Zero back in 2015, I knew I was going to be a benefit corporation. Didn't know quite how I was going to get there, and here I am today, so thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And here we are, 2020. It could just as well be 2050 with all that we've faced this year. COVID, social unrest, fires every day. Wow. More than ever, we face challenges that traditional businesses just can't do on their own. Social impact ventures can take many forms and tackle a variety of problems. Food supply chain resiliency, which we're seeing we need today more than ever, sustainable farming, food insecurity and hunger, and much, much more. So today we'll be talking with 4 founders, and I'm excited, and we'll be discussing how they found innovative ways to solve some of these problems, the challenges they're facing scaling their businesses while also scaling impact. Now that consumers are taking notice of what they eat and the effects of climate change, which we're facing every day, big food companies are starting to take note. So I'm really excited to hear about our 4 panelists and how they're making their impacts. Today we have Bella Lamb. She's the founder and CEO of Coconut Whisk, Finnovations Lab fellowship finalist, and is standing out with her creative, sustainable ways to bring healthy eating and fun to each one of our kitchens, which is wonderful. We also have Lee Wallace. She is the CEO and owner of Peace Coffee. Most of us all know Peace Coffee. She's sharing her expertise and getting the perfect fit between mission and money, so can't wait to hear from her. And Tom Thompson, market strategist with Rebel Greens, bringing experience with big brands in retail food to scaling the indoor greenhouse production of fresh produce in Minnesota. We're going to have 365 days a year of greens, so there'll be no excuses why we don't eat salad. And then Sarah Pritzker, founder and CEO of Pritzker Strategy Group. Her recent work with Atlas Provisions, working with small farmers around the world, connecting them to economic opportunities through new food products, actually inspired a lot of my own work. So let's get started today. Let's start. What we're going to do is each one of you will say your name, your company, and then what your particular impact angle is, and then we'll start with some questions. So why don't we start with Bella? Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Hey everyone, thanks Sue for that lovely introduction. My name is Bella Lamb. I'm the founder and CEO of Coconut Whisk. We're a mission-driven vegan and gluten-free baking mix company based here in Minneapolis. And our social mission is that we support organizations that address food insecurity and hunger.
Great, thank you. How about Lee? Why don't you go next?
Sure, yeah. My name is Lee Wallace. I am the CEO of Minneapolis-based Peace Coffee. Peace Coffee has been in it for good since 1996. We're a mission-driven coffee company that roasts and sells fair trade organic coffee.
Great, thank you. How about Tom? Go for it.
Yes, I'm Tom with Rebel Greens. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. We grow, harvest, and package salads all within the 4 walls of our greenhouse. We have sites here in Owatonna, a site under construction in California, and a new site that's just got inked here in Texas. So we're excited to be a part of the conversation today.
Wow, that's great. All the corners of our country. Wonderful. And Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me and thanks for the great intro, Sue. I am your probably resident cautionary tale. I am the former founder and CEO of a company called Atlas Provisions, and we worked with smallholder farmers around the world to introduce new food products to consumers here in the US. And now I have the privilege of working with a number of other companies that are positioned in the sustainability space. So get to help them solve strategy and growth questions every day.
Great. Well, thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate you joining us, and you're going out to this little different, but not different area and helping other people. So that's going to be a great angle in the conversation today. Appreciate that. So let's start with the questions. Our first question, we're going to look at what you do differently than other impact organizations that are solving something similar. Why don't we go ahead and start with Bella? She's obviously at the Finnovations Lab and getting a lot of assistance and trying to be different than other people in the sector that she is in, which is consumer food flour mixes. But I'll let her talk about how she's developing a difference within her own organization.
Yeah, thank you. So I would say when I launched Coconut Whisk, it wasn't like I was looking at other companies like, oh, how can I be totally different in regards to, impact. I did it with products. But when I started with impact, it was, this was 2 years ago. And I thought, what did I enjoy? Or what was I passionate about? And at the moment it was animals and supporting like animal shelters. But then as we grew as a company and as I grew personally, I realized after some soul searching that it's food insecurity and hunger. It's a personal matter to me. And so when I got that aligned, it just felt so much more real and authentic, and everything just really took off after that. So I think what I do differently as a founder is that I really try to understand like the root issue of like food insecurity and hunger. Not just, food banks and pantries are great, but it's more than that. It's like systemic. It's how do we, advocate in legislation? How do we do more than just donate dollars? So, donating time, donating resources, volunteer hours. So I think that's really the key, and it just feels good to me. So that's kind of how I just do things differently, is being very involved.
Yeah, great. And I'm sure Finnovations Lab is even helping you more. They're a great organization for that particular thing. So good job. Sarah, why don't you weigh in on this? Now that you're more in getting into the consulting and looking at this and helping other impact companies, how do you guide someone to find that exact fit, as Bella was saying, for what their heart says and what their organization can do?
That's a great question. Really, for me, it roots back to how can you weave in impact and mission in everything that you do. So Bella really talked about this. There's a lot of buy one, give one models that are really great, but they don't really get to the root of the issue. So when I am working with a company and when I built my own company, it was really about what are the inequalities in the system that we are trying to change, whether that's climate, whether that's related to human capital, or just how services are provided. So I really encourage people to think deeper about how to weave their mission into, and really doing good into everything that they do. And particularly in the supply chain space. I think a lot of times we are very easily drawn into putting out this sexy message of, we're doing good because we're giving away a pair of shoes for every product that we give or sell. But I think there is so much more impact we can have in providing the people growing our food, packaging our food, distributing our food. How can we think holistically at the source and weave in benefits to them, weave in benefits for how we transport goods and how we build a sustainable supply chain, and really thinking from a system level rather than a short-term but maybe easily explainable thesis.
Yeah, I love that supply chain, and I'm hearing, and we'll get to Tom and Lee here in a minute here, on how that supply chain needs to be connected throughout with that mission. Obviously, a deeper dive includes more people, becomes a little more complicated, but at the end of the day, I think you're right. And to solve some of these things, that actually is what it has to be, is a full circular view of that. So yeah, you have someone like Bella who's newer into it and guiding her through that supply chain. It sounds like she has a lot of experience in education herself to be able to dive into a fuller view. That has changed over the last few years with benefit corporations, I think, on the view of that. So thank you for presenting it that way. And I'm sure you're going to help all of us. So can't wait for that. Let's go into Lee. So Lee, Peace Coffee's been around for a while. And I believe when I originally got wind of it quite a few years back, there was a supply chain view of it pretty much to begin with, and then you took over. So share a little bit about, since you've been owned it and running it, how you're tying those pieces even closer together.
Yeah, well, Peace Coffee, first and foremost, we keep the farmers, the coffee farmers at the heart of everything that we do. And it's we try to keep it simple, but it's of course incredibly complex, as Sarah touched on, right? But we've existed since day one to trade fairly with coffee farmers. And what's really different and unique about our model is that to do that, we established our own coffee importing company. So, we own our own coffee importing company, and how we interact with coffee growing communities is framed by the conversations and the dialogues we have with those farmers. So instead of coming in and saying, hey, we're here to help, what we do is we engage with different communities, and we interact with those communities on their terms and with an understanding of from them what kind of impact they feel we can have. So we're not coming in as the outside experts. We partner with communities. They're experts in what they need. They're experts on how they want to improve their communities. And then we work with them over the years to help them build the future that they're really trying to achieve.
So that's a long game, right?
Yeah, it is a long game. It is, but I can tell you, I can tell stories about, like, the first time I went to visit with our farmer partners in Guatemala. Their big achievement that year was getting electricity. 2 years ago, they're running field trials with different organic varietals, and they're having us come down there and taste the different coffees to see if they'll meet our needs. So they've gone from getting electricity to a sophisticated agribusiness. So the long view does have impact.
Wow, that's so bold. Oh, love that. Love that stuff. So now you, Tom. So with Tom's experience with the big brands and jumping right in, and Revel's going to go big quickly, right? And obviously we've talked a little bit about, fair trade and labor issues, and, like Lee said, to actually be so much part of it that you're, able to actually control some of that, which is great. So now, Tom, you have this whole new innovation on how to grow food really fast. And so taking a look at, how that is different than growing greens regular, and why that is a bit different, but perhaps less challenging to control some of those parts within that supply chain that should be fair and equitable. So jump on in.
Perhaps, but it has its own challenges as well, right? I think as we look at this question, we look at it in kind of two different buckets. What are we doing differently than greens growing today in Mexico and California, and facing pressures of a changing environment, to labor challenges, to what seems like ever-present food safety issues that come up within the lettuce category. So we think we're different from them in a number of ways, right? In terms of how we're controlling the climate, whether it's -20 here in Minnesota outside or 100 degrees, it's that same temperature in the greenhouse. And we're collecting all of our water from the roof of that greenhouse, whether it be snow or rain. And we're sterilizing that water, and we're controlling how much inputs really get applied to the plants based on what they optimally need. So we're different from field farmers in that we're controlling a lot of those variables that they face and shortening that supply chain. So we've got all sorts of supply chain and transportation problems, as we all know, right? We're bringing that product 4 to 6 days closer to the market. So I think, that's how we stack up against traditionally farmed product today, is just a very high-tech system to mitigate some of those pressures from an environmental standpoint. The flip side of that is, knowing that those are all challenges, how do you go about it? And our approach at Revel is this is not new technology per se. When some of my fellow founders founded Bushel Boy back in the 80s, 90% of tomatoes were grown in a field. And now that number's inverse. 90% of tomatoes today are grown in a greenhouse. So the technology has been around. We're a food company at the core. We want to leverage the best of technology that exists out there today to build something that works for lettuce.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Bushel Boy. Yeah, I drive by that all the time. So that's amazing, the inverse and how that is done today. So great. How about managing a COVID? Like, is this something that you've experienced that you're grateful for? Because is it easier to also control a pandemic as far as the workers and the safety part of it?
Well, it's never easy for any organization. I mean, it's been top of our mind. It's been a challenging year for us, as for many, to quadruple our production, to start a new plant, and to do all of that in the middle of a pandemic. But if there is any saving grace for an organization like ours, is we pride ourselves on producing more of an ag tech oriented job. So given that, we've got a fairly automated environment where we're allowed to space people out, and fortunately haven't had any issues, given that we're not doing any sort of manual harvesting, manual packing. We're trying to automate as much as we can and really elevate the level of job we have within our greenhouse.
Yeah, yeah. And we're doing the best we can, right? So thanks for sharing that. How about you, Lee, as far as challenging? Would the last year the most challenging thing be COVID? Is there something else that you've encountered?
I have to just say, COVID's incredibly challenging for everybody at work and at home. And you just heard my dog bark at the beginning of this. So, I feel incredibly fortunate that, people are still drinking coffee. They're just changed where they're drinking it, and they're drinking it at home. I think as an employer, it's been important to realize that, for example, kids are back in school right now, just really connecting with your employees, being aware of the challenges that they have going on at home, figuring out how to be a supportive workplace. I won't say that that's been, personally incredibly difficult, but it has been a challenge for the organization. The good news is, as a company that exists to do good in the world, we've also always wanted to do right by our employees. So it hasn't been a stretch, but it's been something that to really dig into and figure out how to meet those changing needs.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you're looking at doing something for just as much reasons to make a difference as to make a good living, you get up every day regardless of a pandemic, right? You just keep doing it again and again. So I can't imagine it's been challenging for you folks this last few months. Let's go over to Bella on what she's finding most challenging right now, being really new to the startup side, doing the impact. What are you finding right now most challenging?
Gosh, I think most challenging is just wanting to do everything and be everything to everyone, right? I think it's a mindset challenge. I talked it over with Connie at Finovation and Sam Harper at Hippie Feet, and I was like, I feel like I'm not doing enough, as a business owner, as a business leader, for the impact. But then they told me, like, if you really have to also focus on like your business, because if your business doesn't grow, like everything else is going to crumble, right? So it's like just finding that balance, like, okay, we have a bottom line, we got to focus on that, and then the impact will come. So just be patient, give yourself grace. So that's kind of a mindset piece I've been working through currently. So
yeah, thanks for sharing, because we feel that pain. It's definitely something you're constantly going back and forth, gas, and trying to get that equilibrium. So Sarah, so why don't you weigh in on that? Because I know with what's gone on with Atlas and the impact versus the bottom line really came to fruition for you. So share a little bit about that, and then going forward, some words of wisdom for people. Oh, turn that. There she goes.
I'm sorry, Zoom problems. We are one of those businesses that were tremendously disrupted by COVID. So basically what happened is we had an entire year's worth of harvest get became unharvestable due to COVID. And when you are working with such a niche, so our primary product was a popped lotus seed, which is kind of an Indian version of popcorn. It grows in one very particular part of India that is also the poorest and least developed state of India. And what we had happen is when COVID lockdowns went in place, the 2019 harvest was sold to the Indian government to feed the Indian people, which is exactly what should have happened. That's how food supply chains should work. Unfortunately, what it meant for us is we had about 8 months where we have no product to sell. And as a company that is a startup, still very much in startup, we just didn't have the cash flow to weather that storm. At the same time, pandemics are something even the most prepared business owner can't prepare for. And I also am on the flip side working with a couple companies whose fortunes have been made almost overnight by COVID. And there are just some things in business that you can't control and you can't predict, and you just have to weather the storm and trust that everything is going to work out even when it doesn't work out. We were very upfront in communicating with our employees about what was happening and what we were seeing in our supply chain, and we tried to really carry the transparency that we speak about our product with through everything that we did. And ultimately, we just wanted to act with the most integrity that we possibly could. But I think Bella raised such an important point that you have to really, with impact, you have to be a successful business before you can be a successful impact business. And that isn't to say that you shouldn't think about mission first. I think it's always important to view through that, to build your business around that mission. But I know personally, when I was leading Atlas Provisions and with a lot of the founders that I work with now, there is this focus on trying to be as magnanimous and impactful as you possibly can be. And there are moments when you have to step back and say, okay, I may not feel like I'm changing the world, but I got to get my marketing plan set up. I got to get my margins straightened up. And so I think COVID has really brought everyone to looking at the business fundamentals. And then also just really hopefully developing a space in the economy where, like Lee said, we're thinking about other people. I mean, you just have to be cognizant of what your employees are going through and how unprecedented the times around us are. So I know that's a weaving and wandering message, but I think we can really get a lot out of, how do you lead a business through crisis? And sometimes the best way to lead a business through crisis is recognizing the reality of the business fundamentals too.
Yeah, the human part, right? The real down and dirty humanity part of business, right? So thank you for that. I think that's very appropriate in the way it's put. I know those of us who've been in it for a while, we hear this from investors, put the impact stuff aside and show me how the business works, right? And that's frustrating, but now we're seeing that, you don't have to let go of the impact. And what Sarah's saying, you just have to make sure it's business first, and the impact just is tied, integrated all throughout. And that's why I like the discussion so far today about the supply chain, right? The more we look at the supply chain and involve ourselves along the supply chain, the more integrated the impact is. So now we have this balance of balancing our time with all these partners in the supply chain and then on our own businesses. So it looks like Sarah's going to be putting some good training together. I can't wait to see some work that she comes out with, so that can help all of us. That's wonderful. So let's talk some more hurdles, maybe more about going forward, looking forward in the future. Let's get COVID behind us here. Had some good discussion on that. And let's look at going forward, what do we see the hurdles are? So let's start with Tom. Tom, it sounds like Revel's really good about future and looking forward. What do you see going on looking forward?
I think for us, one of the hurdles is, not to use one of our taglines, but we're trying to revolutionize a category and change the way buyers, retail or food service buy. And and also change the consumer mindset. It's a massive industry, the lettuce business that comes from Salinas in Mexico, and you've got hundreds of SKUs on the shelf. You know, as much as consumers say they want something that's sustainable and local, we're also creatures of habit and tend to buy brands that we're familiar with, whether it be a Dole or a Fresh Express or others. So I think one of the hurdles for us is just that adoption from a consumer standpoint, and slowly, spreading the awareness to the consumer of who we are and why we think and why we know we're better from a sustainability and a nutritional content standpoint. There's a lot of factors that I think once consumers get to know who Revel is and our product, I think we'll slowly see that change happen. And then the second part of it is, we welcome competition within this space because we look at it as a little bit of a flywheel effect. We realize for the Targets of the world, the Hy-Vees of the world, the McDonald's of the world to move away from lettuce grown in big production environments, they need to be able to piece together a supply chain. So it goes back to a supply chain, Sue, right? That they need to know that they can get their lettuce sustainably from somewhere else. So we need others to succeed across the US in this space so that can happen. So I think those two things, right? Consumer adoption and a marketplace where we can see more Revel Greens out there that the big purchasers within the United States can buy from.
Yeah, that getting that education out all over, right? And trying to have some sort of message that's somewhat, straightforward and not losing the message, right? So it's a tough balance and it's a lot of effort. Lee, why don't you weigh in on that? Because I know with Peace Coffee, you've had that same kind of hurdle where you're trying to educate consumers and then educate people in the supply chain, but keeping the position of your message really straightforward, which I think Peace Coffee has done a great job doing. So for you doing that now, looking forward, what's the next hurdle for you?
Yeah, I do think it's been interesting to go from, I really resonated with what Tom was saying, because I feel like we've gone from, the weirdos to our issues are top of mind, with consumers. And and we've been doing the same thing the whole time. It's just, the market has slowly built around us. And now, our competitors are, the big coffee companies like Starbucks and Caribou, and that's who we're competing with on shelf. So that's a great evolution. And, for a number of years, we were really, really scrappy, and we scaled by bootstrapping and with debt. And then a few years ago, we really hit the point where we had to start fundraising and bringing in additional equity and monies into the business. I feel like I've been fundraising for like 3 years. Well, I pretty much have been fundraising for like 3 years. So, and it's a tough process, and it's tough because a lot of investors aren't used to looking at the impact space, right? So that then you have all these complicated questions and really needing to convince people what I believe. It's not, I don't think it's feeding people a line, but it's really getting people to understand that the impact creates the value in the brand. That's what's valuable about the Peace Coffee brand is the impacts that we have, and also just the inherent trust that consumers have in our company. And that is incredibly valuable. Big corporations spend a lot of money trying to get consumers to trust them. And Peace has, that's in our DNA, right? And we live that every day. So yeah, I'm hopeful that the fundraising challenge is close to coming to an end, but it has been a real slog, and I know it's something that a lot of founders have to deal with.
Yeah, and I hear you and feel you with that. I'm fundraising all the time, my job. I really think we're seeing some strides in impact investors, impact funds, that are starting to realize how important that consumer education is, that education throughout the supply chain, and actually being involved in all pieces of that, and the ultimate bottom line getting affected positively from all those things. So I'm seeing a lot more people asking to be part of projects around awareness and sustainability. So hopefully the big companies can keep down that road. pandemic maybe slowed it down a little bit, but I think when we get back here, they're going to be more forward on that, and continuing to realize they have to be part of that consumer awareness and education and around sustainability. So hopefully we can get back to that. Bella, how about you for milestones? What are your next milestones for your business? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so milestones for our business. Right now, we are really focusing on e-commerce, but also our retail footprint. And so, of course, we're bootstrapped as well. We've been in it for 2 years, all bootstrapped. And, right now is just finishing some programs that I'm in, like SKU and Lunar Startups, and just developing myself as a founder, as a leader, and then growing, scale-wise with e-com, like online marketplaces, and our retail footprint. So, yeah, I guess biggest hurdle right now is just really, like, we're a plant-based and gluten-free baking mix, and that category has been a little stagnant when it comes to innovation. There has been, natural baking mixes, but nothing like vegan and gluten-free and mission-driven. So when I've talked to buyers before, and they're a little reluctant, even though like data shows that plant-based is growing. Big box stores, they're still kind of waiting to see like what the trend goes. It could be keto, it could be this. So it's just kind of following that market and being aware of that.
And it's moving so fast, right?
Yeah, right.
On it. So Sarah, you've seen, it's been at your position's interesting seeing all these things go on e-commerce. Atlas was that, but also now with consumers and the pandemic, we all have to have some sort of e-commerce in some fashion, and then having the idea of impact. I actually think there might be an advantage in educating consumers and keeping connected with consumers when we're more on the e-commerce side. So can you weigh in a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's an interesting topic because I also think there's a really solid business case for being direct to consumer first. There was actually just a really great article, I think in Bloomberg about Blands, which are kind of direct to consumer brands that have kind of reinvented what it means to be a brand. So Blands are really anything but bland, but they have this universality in conveying their message directly to the people that are consuming their products. And I think it speaks to a more authentic brand voice, which is something, Peace Coffee has always done super, super well. But I think big brands are starting to get wise too. And I really see e-commerce as the future, as kind of a reckoning that we'll be going through, I think, which is with everything happening with regards to social unrest and the realization that our system of capitalism is not working for everyone. I think we're going to expect to see a lot more conversations between brands and their consumers. And I don't think that the brands that are not capable of having those direct conversations are going to thrive or even survive. I also just think, from a practical sense, it's awesome for small brands to save on margin. As if you're looking at food in particular, you're talking about a distributor margin, you're talking about a retailer margin. That's cash you essentially get to save in and put in your pocket if you're selling direct to consumers online. I think, the argument would be, oh, well, you'll spend that money on marketing, which is kind of true, but you're going to have to spend on marketing even if you're in a store. So it's a really great opportunity, I think, especially for small brands. And I think there's so much consumer interest. So Bella mentioned a couple e-commerce platforms, or alluded to, and I think there's incredible space and action happening there. So there's a marketplace called Bubble. You're even seeing e-commerce for wholesale as well, a lot of activity there. And I think it is a opportunity that everyone from small brands to big brands should be leveraging.
That's really gives me hope. Thank you, Sarah. Because I was thinking that, but I wasn't putting it together completely that good like you said it here. So that's great. So really innovation, because our next question here is along innovation. So you know, Tom's company, Revel and Net Zero, has more of a hard technology involved in what they're doing. But maybe we need to look back about innovation, meaning more about data, more about the online tools, the platforms you discussed, that type of thing. And what's exciting about that is that allows us to collaborate better too. So if it's about data-driven, partnering, having a coconut whisk with Peace Coffee do a little online collaborative event that people can at home be having coffee while they're making their, you know, their muffin mix, mug mix. I think there's a mug mix you guys had there, Bella, which is cute. I thought that was really cool. So how can we use innovation when it comes to e-commerce and working together? Does anybody want to chime in maybe something they've done online that's worked for an event or a collaborative event? How about you, Lee? Peace Coffee's, from the community perspective, when I'm out and about, I see Peace Coffee with other types of brands and partnerships and events. So maybe you can share a little bit.
Yeah, we have partnered with other brands for quite a while. One example would be we just did a promotion called No Fair, No Fair. And we partnered with 12 other brands, or 11 other brands for all 12 days of the fair. And every day, you know, we were posting on social media, working to get consumer engagement. People would need to go, there are different activities that people could do. It's sort of a virtual scavenger hunt. And then people would need to give us their contact information. Once they gave us their contact information, they got entered into a sweepstakes. And all of the brands gave, you know, we gave a year of coffee. You know, there's all kinds of different things. So we like that. We feel like it gets good consumer engagement. And it's also a way to say, hey, here are the other sorts of brands that we want people to know that Peace Coffee is affiliated with, and the other like-minded businesses. So it's kind of a rising tide lifts all ships approach.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Thanks for sharing. I figured that was what was behind Peace Coffee. I see it happening so much. How about you, Tom, at the salad side? There's got to be lots of different people because you put stuff on salads, right? So have you done some unique things? And going forward, what would you think would be fun?
You know, we've done similar things like that with what Lee had mentioned, but where we've seen some success as well as is working with chefs at the restaurant level. You know, we thought, you know, the majority of our business would be on the retail and the grocery side of the equation, but we're seeing just really strong support from, you know, higher end restaurants and local restaurants here within the Twin Cities area. And so doing collaborations with different chefs in town has been just a great win for us, just reaching consumers in a different way.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Good job. And how about you, Bella? I know at the Finnovations Lab, they're all about collaborating. I'm sure you're running into some great folks there that want to do some projects together. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, collaboration is like my favorite thing. So we love doing like giveaways on social media. That's huge with local brands. Also like sponsoring events and donating products to like organizations we love, and just showing up and being like really articulate and mindful of who we choose to like vend at. So we like this winter we're going to be at the Minnesota Christmas market, and they donate like 7% of their profits to local organizations. So it's just really about having these partnerships that really align with your mission and values too. So
yeah, for me, it's been really great because I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, but it was just this last 5 years in the impact area. And what I love most is everybody is just so great and nice and kind about wanting to do stuff together, which at first I was like, well, everybody wants to partner. It's a little different. So I'm really excited about that idea with impact and like Finnovations Lab. And there's a lot of different co-working spaces that hold events, and we'll get back there, right? So hopefully next year we're back and physically networking and sharing. So that's great. For the next few minutes, I want to go a little deeper and might want to get a little uncomfortable, but we've talked a little bit about the social unrest, inequities that exist, the injustices that exist that we can't deny anymore. It's here with us. I think the tagline I'm hearing all over the place is, if you're not part of the solution, you're the problem, right? So this stuff exists. And so I feel like this opportunity right now, we can really, all of us in the impact role especially, there's a lot of weight on us to say, You need to be part of the solution. How do we do it when we're facing people that are really stubborn, they're set in their ways, they maybe don't want to look at some of these things, it's uncomfortable, and I get that. I mean, my own experience too, in 5 years, you know, I have seen things, I have been part of conversations, I have heard directly to me or indirectly things that I just really have a difficult time accepting. So I have really, since all this year, what I've been trying really hard is practice how I respond when we get into situations where we know somebody is not acting appropriately. All of us have been fundraising, so you know in the investor world that the stats don't lie. Women and BIPOC companies get a really low share of the big funding. That is something we can say out loud now. We don't even have to wonder if that's true. It is true. And so going forward, how do we make without being combative, how do we have these conversations to really make change so that these challenges we want to fix can actually be funded through our companies and can actually do the work that we need to have done and do it, let's face it, fast, because things need to be done fast. So let's talk a little bit about that, about ideas and perhaps things you've run into. Let's start with Tom, because I know, Tom, you had mentioned that the idea of impact sometimes can be a roadblock when you've raised money and some situations. How do you, when somebody says to you, well, yeah, we want to get you another round of funding, but you know, the impact thing, let's just focus on the numbers. How would you give the audience some guidance on how to get those conversations, not to shy away from the impact, but also have it still part of the conversation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think you can't stray from who you are. You know, I think it goes back to what Lee had said relative to Peace Coffee, right? The impact brings value to the brand brings value to the community based on what their goals are as an organization. We view the same at Rebel Greens within our corner of the universe, right? That we need capital to grow, but we're not going to compromise what our mission and values are as an organization to achieve that. And if we can't, then maybe we need to scale back what some of our aspirations are as a company. But what we do as an organization as it relates to this is, you know, I think it has to permeate your culture, you know, so we think through just what our team looks like. We think through from an institutional standpoint, whether it be our customers or other organizations that we work with, how do we work with them to advance our goals, whether it be socially related or sustainability related. I think it's got to permeate every aspect of your organization, and that's kind of how we look through it, and we don't want to stray from that.
Yeah, I like that, the culture, right? And it starts right inside your business, right? So build it from that going out. How about you, Lee? Because you guys have been able to do this, and you're just doing it. You were doing it when no one else was really even talking about it, right? Like the injustices that you're seeing, and then the whole supply chain, your supply chain around coffee. Give us something that we can say or do and not be afraid, and especially in these times, and we can do it really quick because we all need to really get serious about getting those challenges behind us so we can all get the funding we need and make the difference we can make.
I mean, I always say if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. On the other hand, I think more people should be doing it. So don't let that discourage you. But, you know, it's all of this is, you know, when I first started at Peace Coffee, I was really motivated by the idea that we were helping to create change in coffee growing communities. And then as time went on and I realized how intractable that situation is, you know, we're dealing with people who are extremely marginalized in countries where the political situation is very tough, and often these communities aren't getting very much support or assistance from the government at all. I began realizing the power of being an employer. And I you know, I love the idea that we have jobs at Peace Coffee where people can fill bags of coffee or drive a van and they can, you know, have children and have a 401k and imagine a better future for themselves and their family. And so I really think, you know, we need to acknowledge systemic racism. We need to acknowledge all of the forces that have held people behind. And then I think we have incredible role as an employer to say, how can I begin to work to contribute positively to my community and to help break down those barriers that exist for people. And I think you just, you know, for white people in particular, you just really have to start having these conversations with other white folks. I think that's really the important work.
Yes, the conversations. Thank you for sharing that. And I know, Sarah, I know you and we've pitched a lot. Bella's pitching a lot. And there are things that happen. And I'm going to share a little thing that I've learned. And I've been really trying now in the last few months by a coach that I had that said, when you see somebody saying something and you're part of the conversation, how do you like stop it? So she says the 3 S's. The way you do it is you say, I'm saddened, or I'm surprised, or I'm shocked, and then you say what happened. So when I see people pitching, like say Bella was pitching, and I'm with the judging team and they're judging her pitch, and in the back you hear it a lot, like, oh, I just can't stand to hear her voice, you know, or I can't, I mean, things I've heard are crazy and it's shocking. So I've been practicing, like I'll say, wow, I'm shocked that you would say that her voice bothered you. Can you explain more? You know, because I think some of this is so systemic that they don't, it's not conscious. They're not meaning to be that. They just don't, they just say it and it's out loud, you know? So I think it is you're right, Lee, it's the conversation. It's how to get some role playing down that we can bring the conversation without being combative. So now I'm gonna put it on Sarah. I know she's in a great position right now to be doing some mentoring and some coaching and consulting. What would you give the audience for something when they're in the middle of something and they see it or hear it or part of this? How should they handle it?
Yeah, I think I love your tactic. But I think the one thing that's dependent on is that there's a conversation there. And I think in the Midwest, in Minnesota in particular, we're so reticent to have conversations that are challenging to begin with. So obviously your example gives a great way when you hear something, you know, kind of when you see something, say something. But I think the bigger systemic issue that we're facing is we're not talking about what's going on. We're starting to get a little bit better, but we look at how hard it is to raise, you know, I come from a fairly privileged background. I had a hard time raising. I had great connections. I have an MBA. What's happening to those people that don't have those connections? And, you know, we have a lot of people saying, oh, I want to be involved. I want to help. I just don't know how to help. A great way to help is money. You know, people, business leaders of color and other minorities need support through your dollars, whether that's shopping there, whether that's investing there. And I don't think things can radically change until we see representation. I mean, it's something astonishing. Like there's, I'm going to butcher the statistics, but you know, there's like more CEOs of Fortune 500 companies named Jack than there are women totally on the list. And I think we just have to pull the gloves off and say, like, we're a conservative community, whether we may be politically liberal in the Twin Cities. Greater Minnesota is another, you know, bigger question. But I think we have to talk about the fact that we're conservative with our money, and that to really put Minnesota on the map and to see equal representation, we have to be willing to put our money where our mouth is. So I know that's a little bit out of step with the question that you asked, but I just think that we need to get far more comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations to begin with. And so much of that stems around how we're supporting business leaders and the type of business leaders that we're seeing supported. So even in our own community, you see well-financed companies led predominantly by white men. How are we going to shift that those are the companies that are getting financing? They certainly shouldn't be getting finance. I'm I'm being the lead. They should have financing, but so should a minority-led business as well as a woman-led business.
Yeah.
We just need more representation across the board. And I think it really starts with your dollar. So if you're someone with resources and you're wondering what can you do, invest in a minority entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe investing in a company with a founder that doesn't look like you. Okay.
Exactly.
Maybe like go the opposite of what you're thinking you should do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I appreciate all of you today. We've had some great conversation. We're going to have some time for question and answers here. So I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to ask each one of you some particular questions. We've got into some pretty deep, and I think Sarah's right. I think that is where the healing is, and we have to have more of these conversations. So we'll open it up at this time for some of that conversation, and we'll let people ask you some questions.